Well, hello for our time of reflection on the gospel message, and the way that we do that today is going to be through conversation. I'll introduce my guest in a few moments, but I want to begin by saying we want to recognize and be thankful for the focus of International Holocaust Remembrance Day just yesterday. And we are also approaching Black History Month, and throughout this month I will be having some conversations that matter with some wonderful people from our location here in Delta or the surrounding area. So I have written some notes, and my guest here, Tom, as I introduced him, has said he also has some notes, just because we want to be able to communicate well the things that we have to say. And so forgive us if we look like we're reading a bit. We'll try to make it as conversational as we can. So a few weeks ago I spoke of my plan to open some Conversations That Matter. That's a mini-series that I held 5 or 6 years ago here at the church, named it Conversations That Matter. So I'm resurrecting the title for the next weeks ahead. And this Conversations That Matter with regard to many of the polarized events and hot issues in our local, national, and international communities. It is not my intent to fan the flames of division, violence, and conspiracy by raising all of these issues. So I am asking willing friends and neighbors to share their own experience, intimate personal experiences, as a way of educating our church and our community of the realities that are too easily brushed off, hidden, or even denied, all to our great detriment. The Black Lives Matter movement has caught front and center attention in countries all over the world over these past months and year especially. And while we mild-mannered Canadians may recognize the movement's claims elsewhere in the world, is it really all that bad in Canada? That's a question that I've heard spoken. We like to think not, but the Gospel of Matthew 25:45, the verse says this: He will answer them, I'm telling you the solemn truth. Whenever you failed to do one of these things to someone who is being overlooked or ignored, that was me. You failed to do it to me. That was Jesus saying that. I've been reading books over the last while, and one of them is a book by Jim Wallace, the founder of Sojourners magazine, which addresses faith and social justice issues. And he said, in one of the passages I read of his book, when the pastors remain silent, the church becomes complicit. That statement is one that I don't want, and I don't want the church to be guilty of. And I do want us to be informed, to be deep listeners, and gracious, faith-based conversationalists. How's that for a word? A title that we can all take on. Instead of arguing, let's be conversationalists. Should we ever be faced with one of those hot-button issues of the world around us with people with a different perspective than ours, by someone who is our fellow human being? 2 Timothy 4, verses 2 and 3 reminds us, preach the word, be prepared in season and out of season, reprove, rebuke, and encourage with every form of patient instruction. For the time will come when men will not tolerate sound doctrine, but with itching ears, they will gather around themselves teachers to suit their own desires. It seems like we're in a time like that now. So let's begin. First of all, I would like to welcome the opportunity to say hello to you, Tom. Tom Pickett. He's well known, a local musician and stage actor. He's no stranger to Tsawwassen United Church. He has presented his musical gifts at our Jazz Vespers evening worship when we were able to gather in person to do that. And he is a communicator who loves music and the arts and wants to share his wonder and joy with all who will receive his gifts. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Reverend Dan. I'm humbled by this opportunity.
Oh, so good to have you come.
Pleasure.
So I'll give a lead-in question,
Okay.
and you take it wherever you will.
All right.
Okay? So to start with, could you tell us a bit about your story, about your love for music and your acting, and your hopes and desires for how that gift in you and that blessing that you have can be shared with others?
Right. Well, my desire literally started at my father's feet. He was a member of the Four Aces out of Fort Worth, Texas. And they recorded from 1946 to 1955, though with no chart success. I used to hide under the dining room table to listen to them practice, and I would be fine until I started trying to sing along. And there was no encouragement for Tom to follow in his father's footsteps. So no one was more surprised than I when acting landed on my plate. I was trying to augment my struggling singing career by taking a commercial acting seminar, which led to sing study classes, and then a 30-year relationship with one of the top agents in Canada, Mary Gibson. The theater has proved to be my church and the stage my pulpit. The foundation of that definitely started with Ron Reed at Pacific Theater. But I think it gives me the opportunity to tell story of other people's lives. And I have also had the experience of sitting in the theater at the end of a play and just being moved and unable to move or speak, just contemplating the question that play may have asked of me and how I'm going to work that out in my life. And so, they wanted me to be a preacher when I was 14. But I knew that wasn't going to be my path. Just as a 14-year-old kid. But as an adult, I think the theater offers me the opportunity to give a message.
Proclaim.
Yeah, to proclaim.
Proclaim, yeah. Wonderful. Yeah.
I've been really blessed with the opportunities I've had and the stories I've had to tell in the theater. My first play at Pacific Theater was Master Harold and the Boys, South African play by Kirkegaard, which tells the story of a young boy who's been disappointed by his father, and these two servants, Sam and Willie, are his adult mentors and guide him to a place he has to go in his life to become the man he can be.
That's wonderful. But it's good to hear our stories. It's good to tell our stories. I think it's vital in these conversations that matter that story becomes the center of what we're doing, because that's when we can listen to each other. That's when we can make a connection that, oh, I've had a theater background. I can understand what you're speaking about this place of the reflection and the impact that theater has, the opportunity to be the one that communicates that, proclaims that. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for letting us know a snippet. There's so much more about who Tom is. But, and we want to have a clear conversation here, but we don't have endless time. But it's so good to hear. Thank you. Now I'm going to ask some questions in I think an interesting way, because I'm aware that the way some of these questions are asked in the world around us right now don't come across conversationally. They come across in a challenging way, or in a way of almost of, hey, come on, is there really anything going on here?
Right.
So if my questions sound odd, that's what I'm trying to do, to have Tom respond to those questions in the way that you will. Okay? Okay? So forgive me for the naive way this first question comes across, but with all the goodness that we share, that is being shared, that you offer, it seems our human interactions still get so tripped up with bigotry and hatred. Would you tell us about some of your direct experiences of racism?
Okay. Yes, I will. And I want to speak about an incident other than the few times that I have, as I've written here, caught the N-word hurled at me. A drunk at a liquor store, a couple of guys waiting for a bus on Alberni Street to go down to Seattle to see a game. Just recently, 2019, on Main Street, a First Nations man. We made eye contact, and I thought we were about to have a nod of acknowledgement of one another when he says, and I was going to rehearsal for with the Carnegie Band for one of the concerts as a part of the Heart of the City Festival. So it's a fantastic band led by Brad Muirhead. And we had a fantastic concert. Walking down the street, there was another black man coming my way, and I had the thought, do I warn him? Because this gentleman is at the corner by the, I think it's Waves, there's a Waves coffee shop there. And he was just sitting out front. And who knows what his life is about that day. Yeah. But that's what he had to offer me. And so, we just shrug it off and go on. But the thing that I want to talk about is this other situation, and I want to talk about it because it's harder. It was a sunny day in Tsawwassen. I was in the bank, and it was before lockdown, so there were no masks. And there was a gentleman standing next to me, a white gentleman. I didn't know him, but he felt he should open our conversation with, well, you got a tan. And I replied with some neutral repartee and went about my business to go see the teller. But while I was at the teller, a friend of this gentleman came into the bank with his son. And the son, and they started talking. And as I'm waiting for the teller to complete my transaction, I glance over my shoulder at the group, and there's an exchange between the two, between them, in reference to me. Now, there's a discussion of who I am. And here is the hard part. I know what is being said because I've heard it before. The first time was the first day of junior high school. I had white friends, and I'm using air quotes for those that don't have video, in elementary school. But many of them didn't survive the transition to junior high. I walk up to my friend, and he was talking to some other boys I don't know. They are all white. And after a brief, hi, how's it going, small talk, as I'm walking away, I hear the question, who's that? And the reply, just some nigger I know. And present day, bank. I look back to the teller almost too quickly, and I know listeners, and possibly even you, Reverend Dan, may ask, how do I know what was said between the root and the bank? The temperature in the room changes. The air gets thicker. It's hard to breathe. How does a woman know when comments go from casual to threatening? She just knows. And we, POCs, people of color, just know. And that is what makes it so hard. We're speaking a different language. We cannot understand one another. We're living different life experiences. If I want to understand someone else's life, I must stand in their shoes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom, for letting us hear that. I know it's so important for us to hear and to listen to that. It's not always easy, partly because it's a hard thing to tell, but also partly because I think so often the white population hear it as an accusation when it's not meant that way, purposefully. You're just telling your experience.
Yes.
So what makes it an accusation? And so I would phrase a question to you in this way, again, because I think I've heard the question framed in a similar manner. So just to be blatantly honest, Tom, was it intentionally racist? Not just a misunderstanding? I ask it like that because this is the way that is often used to deflect, to justify, or even deny the reality of racism.
Right. Well, I appreciate your balanced approach to this issue, Reverend Dan, because I admit it is not the worst thing that has happened in the name of racism. And I have been blessed not to have experienced any of that in my own life. I mention this incident because of its greatness, its need for interpretation. The stakes are so high that one cannot even acknowledge you are having a casual conversation with a stranger of another color. Oh, he's the guy I went to elementary school with. Why is that so hard to just say or acknowledge? Because the stakes are so high for you to acknowledge me. Now, why is that? And I think that's where we can talk and have a conversation. Because it's not an indictment of you. It's an acknowledgement of the reality we live in.
And that our society has allowed to continue without addressing it, without listening deeply, I think. And I don't mean to oppose that. That's my thought of the lack of my color's response is, well, let's just not engage it and it'll go away. It doesn't go away.
No.
It won't until we have a friendship, until we purposely choose to be a friend to each other, and to listen deeply. So it's a question that may not have an answer, but how do we respond? So do we just walk away? Do we pretend it didn't really happen? Or do we just stay awkwardly silent? Those are responses that I have seen and had expressed to me, that people don't know what to do and how to do it. Just before I ask you to speak to that a bit, my mom often said to me, it was one of those things Mom always said, if you can't say something good about somebody, don't say anything at all. Now, what I've just done is I've made two kinds of different statements. One is I've raised the question, Do I just walk away, pretend it didn't happen? Or am I actually in control of myself enough to, because I can't think of anything caring to say about the other, I just won't say anything, therefore I won't engage.
Yeah.
Or the other one is the response is uninformed.
Right.
I'm not in control, I'm uninformed. I'm not able to respond appropriately.
Okay. So, two things I'm going to say
Yes.
before I read my written contemplation about this.
Yes.
Is that I am not guiltless of this. I remember I was college age. I pledged my frat, and I was at the University of California campus, and I think Michigan had come to town, and they won the game. But this car drove up, and there a car full of young white guys and one black guy, and they were asking me if I knew where the party was. Well, my bigotry spoke for me instead of my heart, because I looked in the car before I saw the black guy, and I made my response based on those 3 or 4 white guys that I saw. And it wasn't, oh, the party's just down the street, guys. It was racist. It was a racist response. And then I saw the black guy, and his look to me was, oh, come on, brother. Really? You're going to embarrass me like that in front of my friends that I go to school with and probably play football with? And they drove off. Now, my only saving grace is I'm not a poor student in life. I learned from my mistakes. Yeah. I've learned not to judge people based on how they look initially. Yeah. It's how they treat you. Yes. And the second thing I want to say is, you remember Bambi the movie?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I learned that lesson.